Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Racha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Isaiah, the 54th chapter, which deals with, the Lord comforting Israel, okay, and, basically just exhorting Israel to to keep hope alive, all right, as ultimately the Lord is going to return back to us, right? We wouldn't be forsaken forever. And that would lead into the time of salvation, deliverance, and everlasting peace. So this is Isaiah chapter 54, verse 1. Sing, O barren, thou that didst not bear. And this is referring to Israel, okay, because the nation of Israel, which other precepts point to, is likened unto a woman, sometimes a mother, sometimes a wife, sometimes a widow. But as it mentioned here, thou that didst not bear, bring forth into singing and cry aloud. Now, a woman that is barren is one that cannot have children, right? And typically that would be accompanied with sorrow and mourning, because it was a painful and shameful thing for a woman, especially in the ancient world, but just in general, to not be able to have children. So, but here, Israel, being likened unto this woman, is being told rather to rejoice and break forth into singing and cry aloud, thou that didst not travail with child. Right? So you weren't able, you were like a woman that was not able to bear children, but rejoice now. Why? For more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife, saith the Lord. Right? So the Lord is saying, in process of time, right, you're actually going to end up with more children, right, than you being at one point barren. You're going to be likened onto a woman that has more children than that of a married wife. Okay, so rejoice, because this state or this condition, as it would feel like, it's not going to be forever, right? The Lord is going to turn the tables. Verse 2, enlarge the place of thy tent. And also, just to mention, just as not being able to have children is to a woman, and the stress and the state that it puts that woman in, is what's being highlighted here as the condition that Israel was in. Okay, so obviously we know that even if the nation was likened onto a woman, a mother, Israel still had children, right? The nation still had people. But here, the reason the being barren and not travailing, with child, the significance of that is the suffering, right? The suffering that a mother would have to go through, having to experience that, is like how Israel as a nation was suffering, obviously, for different causes. Verse 2, enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thine habitations. And to help with the visual that Isaiah is painting here in the second verse, I'm going to pull up an image here of let's see, ancient world tent. And let's see if I can find. Okay, yeah, I think I've used this visual before, but it should serve as a good example. So, looking at how this is structured, Isaiah starts off saying, "Well, enlarge the place of thy tent," right? And this is once again signifying you're going from a state of being destitute and desolate, like a barren woman, to now being filled with so many children that you need to have more space for your habitation. So enlarging the space of thy tent is like, you have this tent over here, but rather than maybe just this small area, widen it as much as you can. And so this whole verse, the second verse, is about basically make more space, and that is to signify that you're gonna grow, right? You're gonna have, like a mother would have so many children, you're gonna be in that flourishing state. So, as it says, enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thine habitations, right? So if you look, for example, these would be likened onto the curtains, since we're dealing with a tent, or even something like this. Stretching it forth is to accommodate for the wideness now of this tent. Spare not, right? So don't leave any space. Lengthen thy cords and strengthen thy stakes. And these are the cords here that hold the walls or the tent in place. And so to lengthen them, meaning you stretch it, right? And that's, as the tent is wider and you make it larger, you have to strengthen or stretch out the cords more and more, and really fasten those. The stakes are these, right? Like the super huge equivalent of nails to keep the tent upright. Verse 3, for thou shalt break forth on the right hand and on the left. See, so you're gonna flourish so much. You're gonna have so many children, that it's gonna be like, you're gonna be bursting out of this space or this tent from your right side and your left. And thy seed shall inherit the Gentiles. And this time the Gentiles are actually referring to the nations, and the seed being obviously Israel, right? So when you go into that, to inherit, it's like to take possession of. So we're going to possess them, right? When they're going to be servants unto us. And there are many other precepts that mention that as well. So this indicates to us that what Isaiah is speaking of in the 54th chapter is something that's going to happen in the future, because the only time in history when we really had this dominion on a large scale was around the time of King Solomon, right? King David and King Solomon's reign. But sometime after that, as we started to go into captivity again and again, we haven't been in a position to inherit the Gentiles. So this is something that would happen after, right, in the future. And make the desolate cities to be inhabited, because at the point of this prophecy manifesting, it will be post the destruction, right? Post World War III, which is one of the last prophecies. And so you're going to have different areas and cities being built back up that we're going to inhabit, starting with Israel, because we know that land is going to need to be rebuilt. Fear not, for thou shalt not be ashamed, neither be thou confounded, right? To be humiliated, for thou shalt not be put to shame. See, and right now we're in a state of being ashamed, being a reproach, being a proverb and a byword. Anything that bad that happens, one of the top nations that it's associated with is Israel. And, not even just falsely, because in a good amount of cases, it is caused by Israelites anyway. But as it says, no more, right? For thou shalt forget the shame of thy youth. And what was our youth? When you look at the beginning of the nation, it was in captivity, right? We became a nation in slavery. And I'm not talking about, the transatlantic slave trade. I'm talking about back in ancient Egypt. And that's a shameful thing. But we're going to forget that, because the glory the Lord is going to bring to us is going to far surpass and overshadow that. It says, and shall not remember the reproach of thy widowhood anymore. And the reproach of our widowhood is the times when we were in captivity, we were subject to other nations, even till this very day. And the reason is likened onto the reproach of thy widowhood is because, being that the nation of Israel was compared to or looked at as a wife, right, of the Lord, when the Lord turned his back on us, right, we became like a widow. And that is when these other nations had the upper hand in subjecting us. And, obviously things didn't go well for us. And so we became a reproach. But we're not going to remember that anymore, because the Lord is going to, as it goes into in the 5th verse, he's going to be joined back and be a husband again to the nation of Israel, redeeming us and, glorifying us, right? Which starts with the elect, his chosen. So verse 5, for thy maker is thine husband. And who is the maker? The Most High, right? So no longer will we be a widow. The Lord Yahweh of hosts is his name, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. And He is called the Redeemer because he is going to redeem us from this servitude that we're in and put us on high. The God of the whole world shall he be called. And in this sense, called meaning he's going to be recognized and known, right, as the God of Israel, but also the God of the whole world, the creator of all. For the Lord Yahweh hath called thee as a woman forsaken and grieved in spirit, and a wife of youth. So that is the state that Israel is in. All right, when the Lord calling us now from this state, which is when you look at the condition of our people, even those that don't recognize what's going on, they still feel that grief of just being stressed and tired and worn out, which here is being compared to a woman that's forsaken, like abandoned. You don't have anywhere to go, and you hear that. You hear our people complain about that, though they don't take the right actions to remedy it. They complain about having to do everything by themselves, not having anyone to help you, having to struggle every day. It's always a struggle. It's always a fight, and you're tired. And it's like there's nowhere you can lean on for rest. That's like a woman forsaken, i.e., a widow, and grieved in spirit, and a wife of youth when thou wast rejected or refused. And that wife of youth is, it's like a woman that's married at a young, fruitful age, you know, in her prime or whatnot, that was refused, right? When you go into the law, there were cases where a woman would be married, but then the man might find something, that he didn't like in her, and he would reject her or send her away. And that's what the Lord did, right? The Lord ended up rejecting Israel because he found wickedness within us. So as it says, he's going to call us from this state, saith the Lord thy God. For a small moment have I forsaken thee, but with great mercies will I gather thee. See, so the Lord is saying here that, this period of us being forsaken, which interestingly enough, the bulk of that came after the time of Isaiah, but of us being forsaken, of us, because people would say, well, where was God when slavery was happening? Where was God when the Native Americans were being messed up by Esau and all of these different things, right? And we suffered these atrocities, even by the Romans and by the Greeks and all of that. Well, he was there, but we had been forsaken. He turned his back to us for that period, which he likens as a small moment. To a God, to the Most High, of course, it is a small moment, but with great mercies will I gather thee. So when all is said and done, the Lord is going to gather us together, starting with the first fruit, his elect, with mercy. And so no longer will we dwell upon or suffer the effects of that forsaken time. Verse 8, in a little wrath I hid my face from thee for a moment. And that was the times when we became weak. We were scattered. We were subjected to servitude under these other nations. Like when Antiochus was able to come and in First Maccabees do what he did, destroyed, our people without mercy. And there was really little that we could do about it. When the Romans came and besieged us, 66 to 73 AD, and all these things, killed our people, sold them into slavery, all of those things. That was because the Lord was angry with us and he hid his face. So no matter how many times we called upon the Lord and cried to him, we weren't delivered from those situations, all right, as a nation, because the Lord had hid his face from us. But with everlasting kindness will I have mercy on thee. See, so at the end, the kindness the Lord is going to show us is everlasting. So once we're delivered from this final captivity that we are in to this day, that is going to be the beginning, right? The sign of that kindness, and it's going to last forever. Saith the Lord thy Redeemer. For this is as the waters of Noah unto me. And the waters of Noah is talking about the flood. And what the Lord means by that, as he goes on to explain, is, for as I have sworn that the waters of Noah should no more go over the earth, and that's why we have the rainbow. When you read in the book of Genesis, it explains that the rainbow was a signal or a covenant that the Lord would not destroy the earth by water again. So the Lord is saying here, just like I swore that I would not bring those waters upon the earth again, so have I sworn that I will not be wroth with thee, nor rebuke thee. This this um this will come into effect once we are delivered, once we gain that salvation, because it is at that moment when the Lord is going to make us perfect. We're no longer going to sin again, and we're no longer going to have to endure the wrath or the rebuke of the Lord. For the mountains shall depart and the hills be removed, but my kindness shall not depart from thee. Right? So in process of time, right, mountains, hills, nature, life, things die, things change, they move, they're affected by time and events. But the kindness of the Lord is not going to be affected, no matter how long it has been. And as he says, it will not depart from us, so it'll be with us for all eternity. Neither shall the covenant of my peace be removed, saith the Lord that hath mercy on thee. So the Lord is assuring Israel that once it's all said and done, and I deliver you from that final captivity and bestow this mercy upon you, it's going to be with you forever. You'll never have to suffer this again. And that's why he's going to make that covenant with us, to make us perfect. Because then, even if we wanted to, we wouldn't be able to incur the wrath of the Lord, because we're going to be perfect. Verse 11, O thou afflicted, tossed with tempest, which is like a storm, and not comforted. Behold, I will lay thy stones with fair colors, and lay thy foundations with sapphires. Right. So we afflicted is referring to Israel, right? Referring to us. Tossed about like you're in the midst of the eye of a storm, with all manner of sufferings and hardships and difficulties, and none comforted us. Right. No, like nobody was able to deliver us from these calamities we were in, because our Redeemer and our Savior is the one who brought it upon us. And so we had to go through that. But behold, I will lay thy stones. So the Lord he's gonna turn everything around, and your foundation, your stones, with fair colors, and lay the foundations with sapphire. So these are like precious stones, which signify us being in our kingdom again, but also being rich. And I will make and beautified, and I will make thy windows of agates, and which are stones, precious stones, and thy gates of carbuncles, also precious stones, and all thy borders of pleasant stones. And this is going to be, going into like the actual buildings, right? The building of our kingdom. And all thy children shall be taught of the Lord, and great shall be the peace of thy children. See, so the things we suffer now, children being demons, disobedient, gremlins, murderers, none of that is going to be in the kingdom, right? And as it says, all thy children shall be taught of the Lord. So we're not going to need to teach our children of the Lord per se, or any Israelite, as it is written in the scriptures, because they're going to be born with that embedded into their spirit, into their minds. And one example that came to mind is even right now, there's a degree of us being taught of the Lord, because when you look at certain behavior, right, all life has that. Certain behaviors are not taught, and they're not learned. They're innate, meaning that you're born knowing how to do it. Babies are born and they know how to breathe, right? The things that go on internally in a baby, the functions, the body knows how to do that on its own. Okay. When babies, eventually start doing certain things, the fact, like the way your brain processes things that you see, opening your eyes and closing your eyes, nobody teaches a baby how to swallow, right? So like there are certain things, how to cry. You don't teach a baby how to cry. So certain things are already, the Lord has already taught it, right, by embedding it into our process of life, that we don't need to be actually taught how to do those things. And it goes even for animals as well, right? So, but similarly, as these things you're not told how to do in the kingdom, there are going to be certain things that you don't need to teach our children or offspring to do. It's already going to be within them, and this is going to be a peaceful dominion. In righteousness shalt thou be established, thou shalt be far from oppression. So by being established in righteousness, we will be far from oppression, because wickedness brings forth oppression, right? Through wickedness we are brought down, and then the Lord subjects us to being oppressed by other nations. But if we are established in righteousness, then we will forever reign and be far from being oppressed. For thou shalt not fear, and from terror, for it shall not come near thee. See, because we're gonna be righteous, and we're gonna be perfect. So we're not gonna sin, and we're not gonna suffer the wages of sin. Behold, they shall surely gather together, but not by me. Whosoever shall gather together against thee shall fall for thy sake. And here is talking about any adversaries of the nations that try to come against us, right? So meaning that if they gather together to try and come against you, it's not going to be by me. The Lord is not going to be. He's saying that I'm not going to be the one who's raising them up per se to be like a nation that I'm going to put over you because you've been wicked. And that's why whosoever shall gather together against you is going to fall, for your sake, right? They're going to be broken down. They're not going to succeed because of your sake, so that you can be good. Verse 16, behold, I have created a smith that bloweth the coals in the fire. And the smith is like the blacksmith, right? Or the worker. And they had this special fan that you could use to actually blow the fire, right? Or the coals that are in the fire to keep the fire going, and bringeth forth an instrument for his work, right? Because they labor to create these things that require the heat and the fire and so on and so forth, for a purpose. And I have created the waster to destroy. Now, yes, the Lord did create, smiths, right, by the wisdom that they needed to accomplish these things. But these smiths here in verse 16, as we know, because it mentions the waster to destroy, these smiths are a more advanced level than just your basic blacksmith. These are what we would call today nuclear physicists, who create, nuclear weapons and so on and so forth. They are the ones who the Lord has put it into their minds to bring forth this instrument, which is ultimately these nuclear missiles that are also likened onto the waster. And their job or their work is going to be to destroy. All right. And so that is the purpose as to why the Lord has created them. And that destruction is going to be used in fulfilling one of the last major prophecies. So that's why the Lord had them created and gave them that wisdom. Verse 17, but with all of that, no weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper. So whether it's physical, mental, psychological, spiritual, whatever that is concocted to come against us, it's going to fail. And every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. So the Lord has given us that ability through the Holy Spirit to be able to condemn those that come against us, because if you come against us, you're really coming against the Lord. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. So inherently, okay, we've been blessed with this protection and this ability, as it says, of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord Yahweh. Okay, so the righteousness is of Yahweh Ba'asham Yahweh Shai. And so we are justified, all right, as servants of the Lord by Yahweh Ba'asham Yahweh Shai. And that brings us to the end of the book of Isaiah, the 54th chapter. Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'asham Yahweh Shai Ba'asham Racha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.